Well, thank you to the people who are here. We are happy to have you. We'll get started, and anyone else who filters in will just catch up with us. I'm Caroline Segal. I'm a clinical psychologist here at SASCO. I focus mostly on parent coaching work and working with parents individually to support them. I have the honor of co-presenting with Grace DeGrado, my dear friend and an occupational therapist with us. Grace and I are very excited about this talk. We were just talking about how we've been talking about this talk for a while, because this is such a challenging and exciting developmental time frame. The tweens, the middle school years, most of us have some very cringy and uncomfortable memories of the rite of passage of getting through middle school ourselves, and watching your kid go through that is even more challenging. And it's also a time where we really build on our resilience, getting through these tough times and coming into our own and becoming little people. So it's a time that we love, and we are excited to talk about, how we as parents and as our other supports can help these kiddos to make the most of this very transitional time period. Grace, you can flip to the next slide.
Great. Okay.
So, what we're going to talk about today, I'll start us off by talking about some brain development and psychological development that are relevant to tween development. And then Grace is going to talk to us a little bit about sensory and executive functioning and how all of this contributes to the awkwardness of the tweenage years. And then we'll get into the good stuff of some strategies to help support your child to go from, awkward and struggling to hopefully thriving and enjoying. So before we dive in, I just wanted to take a moment for celebration, because we do often talk about this time period as being so uncomfortable. And I also just wanted to honor how beautiful it is. This is the time that your kids are learning how to be little adults. And the amazing thing about watching them go through this process is getting to see their personalities just unfold in front of you. As they start to get more independence, they start to figure out who they are in this world and what they really believe. And their friendships go from, the cute and simple friendships of childhood where you see someone on the playground and you go play tag, to like having real deep meaning, being rich and more sustainable and fulfilling. So it's an incredible time. And we can go to the next slide and talk about what makes it also a challenging time. But from the neurological side of things, and the physical side, there is so much change that is happening in our tweens' bodies, like growth spurts, acne growth, like all kinds of growth. And there's also brain growth. There's a lot of brain growth that we're not seeing, but it's happening, and it's happening in kind of disjointed ways. So one of the things that's important to keep in mind with tween brain development is that as this rapid period of growth is happening, the growth that's a little slower is the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is housed in the frontal lobe, and it's the part of the brain that's responsible for decision making, for using good judgment, for planning ahead, like long-term planning, thinking through the consequences of our actions, and inhibiting our impulses. Very important part of being an adult. And it's the only part of the brain that really is not quite up to snuff for tweens and teens. And while the prefrontal cortex is developing a little more slowly, somebody needs to be making the decisions in the brain. And a lot of times it ends up being the amygdala. The amygdala is the emotion center of the brain. It's the part that acts on impulses. It's the anxiety and anger center. So those kind of big and sudden emotional reactions you might see from your tweens, that's their amygdala talking. So in this transitional period, they are prone to having the amygdala take over a lot and not quite having their judgment all the way there. But the problem is they're starting to feel like an adult, so they think they have good judgment, and that's part of where we get into some complications. You know, the next slide.
Mhm.
I want to talk about some psychological development phenomena that are relevant to tweens. You might notice your tween is a little self-absorbed, and if that's the case, it's pretty typical, and there's reasons for it. One phenomenon at play is the imaginary audience. It's basically the concept that tweens are, based on where they are in their developmental trajectory, they are prone to believe that everybody's looking at them. Like genuinely think that everything that happens is about them. They're in this little imaginary spotlight. They walk into the cafeteria, someone's laughing in the corner of the room, and they're thinking it's because of my outfit or it's because of something that I said. Another concept at play is a personal fable, which is this idea that tweens tend to think that what's happening to them has only ever happened to them, that they are unique in this world. So if you're ever talking to your tween and you're like, I was your age once too, like I've been through these struggles, you're trying to join with them and they shut you down and they're like, you have no idea what I've been through. It was different back then, right? That's the personal fable. That's genuinely their belief that they are the only ones who have been through this. So those efforts to join with them, they may be shutting down because that's where they are in their brain development. So when you put these things together, it makes for a lot of self-consciousness for our tweens, thinking that everyone is looking at them and that no one has ever walked this path before. The last bit of theory I wanted to throw at you guys is Eric Erickson, great developmental psychologist, has theories for every age from birth to grave of, at every age, there's a big conflict that it's our job to resolve. Like we have goals at different stages of life. And there are two that are relevant to the tween years. So for your earlier tweens, the main goal is industry, is feeling a sense of competence in their academics, in their extracurriculars, in their relationships, just like feeling like they've got the hang of things, they know what they're doing. That's their goal. And the tweens who do not accomplish this goal fall prey to feeling inferiority, feeling inadequate, low self-confidence, less than others. So for your younger tweens, just a general mindset that's helpful to have is give them a lot of positive feedback. Focus more on effort rather than final result so that they can start to feel competent even when things aren't going quite perfectly, but like feel that sense of confidence in themselves that they're on the journey. For the older tweens, and then this goes through adolescence, the main goal is identity formation. So this is where the goal for your older tween is to explore their identity, to figure out what their identity really is. So it's this intense exploration of their values, their beliefs, their goals. It might be more tangible in some ways, exploring music choices and clothing choices, exploring ways of treating people, things that you might not always approve of as you see it happening, but the exploration is necessary for them to figure out what their identity really is. And the risk of the tweens who do not explore their identity is that they can wind up feeling really unsure about who they are and uncertain about their values and their direction in life. So for your older tweens, it really helps to give them the room to do that exploration. Let them try out different phases. Your tween might come home one day going through a grunge phase and you're like, I know you and that's not you. But that's okay. If they have the space to try it out and realize for themselves this isn't quite a fit, they're going to feel so much more self-secure when they get over the hump of this developmental phase. When I think of tweens, I think of this phrase: I am who I think you think I am. And the reason this is important is because tweens are at a place where, for their whole life until now, everything has been about their family or school, and now it's starting to be about peers. So while your tweens are going through all of this identity exploration and trying to feel confident in themselves, the way that they're evaluating their progress is based on how their peers are reacting to them. I have a visceral memory of being a tween and wearing like a kind of controversial outfit to school and spending the whole day just looking around to see how other people reacted to that outfit. And I never wore that outfit again because I did not like the response that I got. But that was part of the process. That's part of how tweens figure out what fits and what doesn't, is seeing how do people respond and do I like that response? So it means that a lot of tweens end up kind of copying each other or trying out things that seem a little off or different for them. And that's pretty typical. So a quick summary of this first part is, from the psychological perspective, what is making things so awkward at this time? We have the genuine awkwardness of the uneven physical and brain development, where every day you wake up to, a new, like, actual visible identity, and new ways of thinking and all of that. While these tweens are exploring their identities, they're depending on their peers to help them figure out who they actually are, which is really unpredictable and awkward and uncomfortable. They're so self-conscious because of that imaginary audience feeling like they're always in the spotlight. They don't really know who they are yet. They're trying to figure that out while all this other stuff is happening. They're in between life stages where they're not a kid and they're not an adult, and they have to figure out how to cross that bridge. And then with that brain development we were talking about, there's so much emotion and drama, and everything is really heightened. So it makes for a lot of psychological challenge. I'll pass it to Grace now.
Thank you. So with that wonderful context on brain and psychosocial development, we're going to shift gears a little to talk about the brain and body connections that are developed in the tween years. And to do that, I first want to provide you with a little bit of context on sensory processing, because our sensory system is what keeps it all together. Sensory processing is the ability to take in information from the surrounding environment, make sense of it, and then use that information to interact with the environment. And when I say that in the environment, it's like this physical surroundings around you, as well as like the people that you're with. There's 5 sensory systems that everyone knows: the sight, taste, smell, hear, and touch. But there's also 2 additional hidden sensory systems that are internal, and they play a large role in regulation and how we process information. The proprioceptive and the vestibular system are those 2 hidden senses. Depending on how well these systems take in information, your body will then be able to process how you're feeling. This concept is called interoception, which we'll talk a little bit more in a minute. I want to first touch upon the 2 bonus senses in the next slide, because in our teenage years, our bodies are developing at a really fast rate, like Caroline mentioned. And this often results in imbalances between the proprioceptive and the vestibular system, which then contributes to some of the emotional things that we're seeing in those awkward years, as well as, just difficulties with coordination. Okay, so the vestibular system. It's a structure that's housed in our inner ear, very close to our auditory system. It consists of little teeny tiny bones that process linear movement, so back and forth movement, the force of gravity, as well as rotational movement of our head. It helps us center our sleep and wake cycles, and it plays a role in attention, arousal, and emotional regulation. In the tween years, the system is often underactivated or overactivated, which means tweens often need a little bit more input to stay alert and attentive than they're able to get while they're sitting at their desks all day. So the vestibular system also affects body awareness, resulting in more clumsiness. Risk taking becomes a lot more fun. So unsafe play feels better because you're getting a lot more intense movement. It also impacts our sleep and wake cycle, that causes tweens to want to stay up later and sleep in longer. So that's circadian rhythm, as well as impacts their ability to understand their feelings, which then affects their emotional regulation. So in short, the vestibular system answers the question, where am I and why can't I sit still? The other system is called our proprioceptive system. It's located in your muscles and joints, and it gives your body awareness and detects and controls force and pressure. So it's like how much force you're using to like push a cart or write your name. It consists of stretch receptors in your muscles that unconsciously give your body feedback of where your body is in space. So it's the ability, like if I close my eyes, I know that I can still understand that my legs are crossed, even though I'm not seeing them right now. It helps you feel where your body is, because your body's actually giving your nervous system feedback. When we talk about proprioceptive input, it's often referred to heavy work, which can be passive or active. We feel proprioceptive input all the time. It's the calm, relaxed feeling that we get after a workout or after a run or a massage. Anytime our muscles have been activated, stretched, pushed, pulled, what have you, it gives our body calming input because it releases serotonin to our joints and our nervous system, which is really calming and regulating. So it's an important thing for tweens to get because their life often feels so imbalanced. And so if we can provide them with a little bit of like calming, regulating movement, it can have an effect on their emotional regulation and just like homeostasis, like the ability to feel at peace in their own body. Um, Generally, you can see challenges within the proprioceptive system in the tween years through awkward movements, using too little or too much force, and challenges with problem solving. Tweens often need a lot more proprioceptive input to help regulate their nervous system, but have a really hard time figuring out the right strategy to help them stay calm. Also, problem solving what strategy could help them stay calm is also really hard for them. Okay, so now we're going to talk about interoception. It's the ability to answer the question of what am I feeling right now? It's our body's ability to sense and interpret signals like hunger, thirst, temperature, our heart rate, and our emotional states. It's how we recognize when we're hungry and we need to use the bathroom, or if we feel anxious. You could think of it as our body's inner GPS, which helps us navigate how we feel physically and emotionally. During the tween years, like Caroline mentioned, hormonal shifts, brain development, and growth spurts all impact our interoception awareness. You like in those tween years, you wake up and all of a sudden you're like 2 inches taller, and your body's just totally thrown off. Your center of gravity's off. You just don't know where you are in space. So challenges with our interoception can impact struggling to recognize basic body needs, like forgetting to eat or not realizing they're hungry until they feel lightheaded or hangry. Not ignoring the need to use the bathroom, leading to like accidents in some cases or general discomfort. Again, like that agita too of feeling like something's off, but not knowing what it is exactly. Um, Interoception challenges can help or can contribute to difficulty regulating emotions. So, not connecting your physical sensations like a racing heart rate to anxiety or stress. Having big feelings without understanding why or what contributes to it. And then overreacting to minor stressors because you're misinterpreting your body signals. It also adds to just general awkwardness in social settings. So misjudging their body's response to like hot or cold, like refusing to wear a jacket in the winter. And then I think we all have experience with certain tweens, whether they're your own kid or someone you work with. It's like the kid that'll come in shorts in the middle of January. And they're like, no, I don't feel cold. It's because they don't. Their interoception, they might get annoyed by minor things, but they're not recognizing that they're feeling cold. Um, it can also contribute to feeling off, but not knowing why, and struggling with physical coordination, leading to a lot of clumsiness. So I'll go to the next slide. So just as an overview, supporting your tween's sensory regulation will help them exponentially with their emotional regulation. More often than not, a big emotional outburst or meltdown can be supported and resolved with kindness, compassion, and some type of sensory input to help their nervous system regulate. When our bodies don't get the input that we need, it causes us to feel really overwhelmed, have a shorter fuse, meltdowns, shutdowns, and general dysregulation. This is true of adults, and it's more impacted and feels stronger in tweens. So to support your kid when they're having a hard time, you can prompt them to check in with their inner GPS by asking how their body's feeling right now, by maybe taking a step back from the emotion and not trying to mind read what they're feeling. You can just objectively state what you're seeing to help them get out of their head, out of that mood swing, and into their body. Statements like, Wow, your shoulders look really tense. They're all the way up to your ears, or you're holding your pencil really tightly that your knuckles are starting to be white. Can help your tween realize how their body's reacting to certain stresses and improve their interoception. Um, and so generally, why do the tweens feel so awkward? This is like a summary slide similar to what Caroline did, focusing a little bit more on just like the body awareness. Um, Tween years, there's such higher demands. I really loved your line, Caroline, about being an adult in training. And if that wasn't enough, their bodies are changing at a really fast rate. I'm going to break down the factors that they're struggling with. So you have a jumping off point. Sorry, my Alexa's speaking to me right now. I apologize. Um, I wanted to break down the factors that they're struggling with so you guys could have a jumping off point to help them problem solve and learn to work through the changes that they're experiencing. So, motor clumsiness is like probably the first one that you'll see. All of a sudden, with that growth spurt, your tween's going to be bumping into things a lot more. Just have like things like gym class might be a lot more tricky because their coordination could be off and their sense of balance. Fine motor skills are also affected with this motor clumsiness. So, like, this is handwriting challenges, which can be really impactful because at in this stage of their life, in the middle school years, they're asked to write so much more. And so, with an increase in demand, things are going to feel a lot more tricky. Um, there could be some sensory sensitivities with growth spurts or developing some tactile sensitivities. Clothes could feel different, which could feel itchy or just not covering you the way you expected. And then if you think about, that imaginary audience, like, oh my goodness, if my clothes aren't fitting just right, or if they're rubbing against me in a really weird way, are other people going to notice? Um, Other sensory sensitivities too, like I mentioned with the vestibular system, sitting still gets a lot harder and they need a lot more heavy work in their life to help them stay calm. But again, they don't have the skills to identify what they actually need or how to use their time management skills so that they can sneak in some heavy work in a discreet way. There's sleep issues that also contribute to just general awkwardness and development. Vestibular over or under activation can contribute to sleep challenges, which then leads to moodiness, emotional dysregulation, including like increased sensitivity to feedback, a low frustration tolerance, and then just general social awkwardness, misreading social cues, having challenges with personal space or difficulty with peer group shifts, not understanding why a certain group likes this game versus the other game that you guys have been playing for so long. Um, so again, this is, contributes due to the prefrontal cortex developing, which is our executive functioning system. It contributes to low impulsivity, difficulty with just self-monitoring, and then as well, hormonal shifts also affect this emotional regulation and sensory sensitivities. So, with all that background in mind, we are going to shift gears to actual ways you can help your tween thrive and build connections to others. So I'm going to hand it off to Caroline again.
So, thinking about thriving and what that looks like in relationships, I always find it helpful to kind of break that down and define it a little. So, I've written out here some different skills that are part of being an effective communicator. And I encourage you to just take a minute and read through them and think about your tween. And think about for your tween, which are the skills that they are really effective with, which are the ones they have a good handle on, and which are the ones that they're still developing that might be an area of vulnerability. Because as we go through the rest of the talk, if you keep their profile in your mind, you can think about how to tailor some of the strategies we're recommending to really target the specific things that you either want to keep building on or that you need to, kind of help build up. So you might have a tween who is, really empathic, like always notices when someone's having a tough time. They're great at checking in, but maybe their self advocacy is not quite there. Maybe they're not so good at speaking up for themselves when they need help. Maybe you've got a tween who's really good at turn taking, like their social reciprocity. They can keep up a good conversation and a back and forth, but they don't always know what to share and what to keep to themselves. So if you hold your tween's profile in mind, we can think about how to help kind of shape and reinforce and get them where you are hoping to get them to go. The tricky thing about being a parent at this age is that we can't actually just sit them down and teach them these skills anymore, like maybe you could when they were younger. We now have to be a little more indirect and a little bit more clever about how we get these lessons through to them, because your middle schooler is going to completely shut you down if you tell them, what they're doing wrong socially. So we go to the next slide. We can talk, about a couple metaphors that I keep in mind for what it means to be a tween parent. So one is being their safety net. At this stage, you're not really you're not putting them on the trapeze. They're doing that all on their own. They're jumping out there and getting out there in the world. But if you can maintain that supportive relationship with them such that they have the room to go explore and try things out, and you are always there to catch them, you're going to keep a strong relationship going. The other metaphor I love for this age is learner's permit model. Your tween is the one in the driver's seat. They are deciding where to turn and how fast or slow to go. And you get to be in the passenger seat. You get to be their companion. You get to play the music in the car. And you're there. If they're really going off the rails, you can pull that wheel and bring them back to safety. But you are the passenger seat and they're the ones in control. So we can go to the next slide. So one of my favorite skills, like an actual tangible skill for how to execute on some of this, is active listening, which sounds really simple, but is actually quite challenging to put into practice, especially with a tween who might push your buttons and get you emotional and get you out of the place of being their sounding board. But active listening is all about doing more listening than talking. So your goal here is to listen without giving any kind of feedback, without giving advice, without solving their problems, without giving any criticism, but just listening without judgment. Because the more that you can listen non-judgmentally, the more your tween is going to feel comfortable coming to you and sharing with you. And so it's about investing in the long game. So curiosity is a very helpful approach to take, with how you actively listen to your tween. And I like to think about being a talk show host. So if you picture what a talk show host does, like their guest is sitting there and they're the ones doing most of the talking and they're telling their story. And the talk show host is there to reflect back to them what they've said. Let's say you have a tween who's not really a talker. Reflecting can be a powerful skill to open that door a little bit more. Like your tween might kind of slouch and get into the car one day and be like, I have had the toughest day. Like, I don't even want to talk. And if all you do is reflect and then give some space and be like, wow, yeah, it sounds like you had a really hard day. And you just pause. And like they're waiting for you to come in with what's wrong, tell me everything, or be like, oh, like you didn't do that thing again, did you? But if you just reflect and pause, they might be like, yeah, you don't even know the half of it. I mean, you weren't even there at lunch when, and all of a sudden they're talking. So reflecting can be a really powerful way to get them to share. And then validating. Validating is one that parents often struggle with because they come to me and they say, like, how can I validate the terrible choices that they're making? I don't want them to keep making these bad choices. But what you can validate is their emotion, because our emotions are always valid, even if the action is disagreeable. So let's say you do have a talker. Let's say your kid comes home one day and she's like, oh, mom, I know you got a call from the office, but like, listen, Susie was so awful. She told this really embarrassing story to all of our friends. It was horrible. So, yeah, I tripped her in front of everybody because she deserved it. And now I'm the one who got sent to the principal's office. Like, you might be like, whoa, like hit the brakes. Tripping somebody is not a great way to solve that problem. But then your tween is going to completely shut you out. So, if instead you can just stay with them in the emotion for a minute and be like, wow, that must have been so embarrassing. Or like, I could only imagine how betrayed you feel. They're going to stick with you a little longer. And then you can be the talk show host. The talk show host asks open ended questions without any judgment in their tone. voice just to get their speakers to talk and think. So they might ask things like, "Man, like, how were you feeling when Susie said that?" And like, "What do you think she did that for? What do you think was going through her head?" And I wonder how Susie felt when you tripped her. Like, I wonder what the other kids thought about that. And you can start to get them to think and introspect a little bit more without it being like, "That was a bad move. You should never have tripped Susie." You can go to the next slide.
That's a great analogy, Caroline. Okay.
So, another thing that we are kind of transitioning as parents in our role with is problem solving. For when our kids are little, we problem solve for them all the time. Their shoe is untied, we go and we tie it. It's a challenge at this stage to figure out how to step back and let your tween learn how to solve problems, knowing that they are not quite neurologically equipped to solve problems that effectively. So, what I've done here is I've written the actual steps of solving a problem, not because I want you to sit your tween down and say, "Someone showed me this list and this is what you need to do," but more so that you can have the template in your mind so that when you're talking with your tween and you're being a talk show host, you can try to craftfully get them to solve problems with a little bit more thought than tweens are inclined to do. So the first step seems obvious, but it isn't actually always so obvious to find the problem. If your tween has just come home with the Susie story and they got to figure out what they're doing the next day, what problem are they solving? Are they trying to figure out how to make amends with Susie? Are they trying to figure out how to get out of trouble with admin, how to save face with everybody else who saw what happened? Like, actually figuring out what it is they want to plan for can help them come up with solutions that are relevant. And then step two is the most important part, because what a tween is inclined to do is think of a solution and act on it. Remember, they are impulsive and they don't have that, ability to control those impulses and think through long-term consequences. So they're going to think, "I'm going to trip her," and then they're going to trip her. But a way that you can build some of their ability to step back and think of the big picture is by encouraging them to share their potential solutions with you without any judgment, and then see if they can come up with other options too. So it might be that your tween is like, "I don't think I've taken this far enough. Like, I need revenge. I'm going to put a death note in Susie's locker." Like, you're not going to let your kid put a death note in somebody's locker. But if you start by being like, "Okay, you know what? That's one idea. That's one thing you could do. You could put a death note in her locker. Like, let's think of some more. What else could you do? I could spread a rumor about her. I could do this. I could do that." If they keep coming up with solutions, likely there'll be a few good ones in there. And if you get the whole list out and you say, like, let's not even think them through yet. Let's just come up with everything we can come up with. Then when you get to step three, they might be a little bit more mindful and reflective and be able to think through, okay, so what would happen if you put a death note in her locker? Like, yeah, maybe it would feel really satisfying at first. And also maybe it would lead to a suspension, right? Like, there might be more to this picture. And if you can go through and help them, not you, but them evaluate each of their solutions and think through, like, is it safe? Is it fair? Does it lead to good feelings? They are more likely to come up with a solution or a set of solutions that shows some more judgment because you've helped them slow down. Then they can go try it out. And hopefully, if you've got the supportive relationship with them from all your great active listening, hopefully they'll come back and they'll share with you how it went. And then you can solve the next problem together. You can do the next slide.
Okay. Um, so uh, Bouncing off of that, we're going to talk about building competence through movement and some of the sensory regulation strategies that you can do to help your tween stay regulated throughout the day. Um, so there's so much going on in a tween's body, but there are ways to support them through movement to help their nervous system feel calmer, which then will have a positive impact on their overall emotional regulation, alertness, and start to build some of those interoceptive skills that we were talking about. Um, so for proprioceptive and which is heavy work and vestibular, which is movement needs, heavy work activities throughout the day can proactively support their regulation. So doing things like yoga, weighted activities, having a resistance band around the bottom of their chair when they do homework, or wall push-ups are all ways to actively give your tween a break during times that they might feel are very challenging, like when they're stuck doing a really tricky math problem, or when they're just not feeling right. You can encourage your tween to have movement breaks at school, to have, to go out and take a water break if they're starting to feel overwhelmed, have a crunchy snack, which actually gives your jaw heavy work and releases calming serotonin. Gum can do the same thing. Raising your hand to help pass out papers are all discrete ways to give your tween movement, and heavy work that they need to feel calm throughout the day. Um, Encourage your tween to join a club or an organized sport, is a really great suggestion because it'll help them build the social skills that they need in a really organized way. It works on some of that problem solving, physically and emotionally, as they connect to other kids on their team. And I put a note about practicing with them on this slide because, as we all know, it's like awkward. It's hard. Motor clumsiness is like a huge factor in these teenage years. So, if they have someone like a neutral partner or parent to help practice with them and refine those skills, then they're going to go into that club or organized sport with a lot more confidence. Um, and then I included running as well because it's just such a great one that gives them a lot of heavy work and a lot of movement at such an intense rate, but also they're in control of it. So it just builds a lot of great skills. On to the next slide. For emotional and social regulation, some sensory strategies that you can use at home are to teach self-advocacy. There's so much power in the phrase, I need a break. And being able to pick a tool or an activity that helps them feel better would then support their executive functioning, their problem solving skills. It builds their independence and helps their interoception. Um, like Caroline mentioned, working through scenarios for and from a sensory perspective, you can talk about the personal space and body language. Interpreting body language can help them understand, what they think the audience is reacting, to what they're doing. Validating their emotions. We talked about that a little bit before, but just validating how they're feeling, reflecting back on what you're seeing, and helping them come up with coping strategies. That helps, especially if they're melting down or having a shutdown or just feeling generally really overwhelmed. Um, as your tween is dysregulated, like if they're having just like such a big meltdown, just saying what you're seeing without interpreting it, I think really helps them get out of their head and into their body and helps them feel a little bit more at ease and starts them to calm down. And then I love the suggestion to create a cool off spot that's neutral, cozy, and has low lighting. It doesn't have to be a teepee. It doesn't have to be like this big thing. It can be pillows in the corner of your room and just having a spot for them to go to cool off and take a break. Will be really helpful. From a sensory perspective, it reduces the sensory input around them and it promotes coming back to a regulated, calming state. And praising your tween when they are able to engage in any of those coping strategies will be really helpful because then it helps them like learn what their body needs, as well as, helping them build a positive sense of self and feel more in control. Okay, and on to the next slide.
I want that cozy corner for myself, by the way. That looked very, very soothing. Um, so in thinking about how we are supporting our tweens with these big life skills, but through indirect ways, I like to think about, what are the activities you already have available to you? Because a lot of them are actually natural opportunities to build on, some of the specific skills that you might have had in mind from that slide with the different, self-advocacy, frustration tolerance, all of that. So think about your tween And then go open your game closet and see what you already have in there. I guarantee you, you've got games that are going to work on some of those skills. This slide has some examples. I was telling Grace the other day, I was playing Trouble with a tween just by chance, and I was thinking about this talk. So I was really mindful while playing about what were the different communication skills that were at play. And I noticed that the tween was really paying attention to what I was doing to figure out what move they were going to make. So she was doing a lot of perspective taking. And then, of course, frustration tolerance is so huge with Trouble. When you're about to win and somebody sends you back to the start, that's so frustrating, right? Can make anyone boil over. So there's so many incredibly rich opportunities to build on social skills just in games, activities, the things you normally do. And so I find it helpful to think about, what are the areas that you want your tween to work on, and use things like games and activities to, do two different things. One is model. So while I was playing with this tween, I was like, all right, you know what? I'm going to model frustration tolerance just to get into the habit of it. So whenever I got knocked back, I would be like, oh man, that is so frustrating. Right? Healthy emotional expression is one of our skills, right? Like, that's so frustrating. Like take my deep breath. Then resilience, like get back on the horse. Okay, you know what? Game's not over. I'm still in it. I'm coming back, right? And just like using that kind of language or modeling with your body language, all of that can help to build up some of these skills. And then the other, as Grace was saying, is reinforcing. Whenever you see your tween doing something that's, worthy of reinforcing, that's moving in the direction of building a social skill, giving them positive feedback for it. So I might say to that tween, like, hey, I saw what you just did there. You were thinking about what I was going to do. That is so clever. Like, that was a really smart way to figure out your next move. Like, just giving a little bit of positive feedback doesn't have to be anything overly effusive, but just acknowledging it can help build on that skill.
Yeah, this slide is great because it's so much of what we already have. Um, I think when you play these games with your kids, you can ask them to invite other friends over, and then it becomes like a bigger game night where they're working on question asking and listening and reciprocal communication and building conversation skills and just trying to problem solve all together. I think that would be a really great way to build connection to your kid and then also support them as they connect to others and learn how to communicate what they need. Um, that's my 2 cents on games.
Plus, what kid doesn't love the opportunity to have a game night with all their friends?
Oh, so true.
Another indirect way that I love to use to have, the kind of talks with our kids that we wish we could have directly, but we know they're going to shut us down, is using the content that they're already interested in. So whether it be, watching TV or movies with them or reading books with them. I put this image of the OC on here, which you might be thinking that's a little bit dated. But the reason I did that is that when I was a teenager, my mom sat me down one day and she said, Caroline, I found this great new show. I watched the first episode. It's called The OC. You're going to love it. I want us to watch it together. And if any of you have seen The OC, it's a weird show to watch with a parent. It's very racy. But every Thursday night at 9 o'clock, my mom and I watched The OC together. And she was so chill about it. She never made me feel uncomfortable. She was very non judgmental with all the content that came up. And we just sat and talked. We talked about the characters and we talked about their choices and their feelings and how they handle different things. And what I realized by the end of season one is that without ever having sat down and had a direct conversation, my mom and I had a plan for what I would do if I ever had a teen pregnancy and what I would do if I went to a party and somebody offered me alcohol. We had talked about all of this by talking about characters. And so it never felt threatening or awkward or uncomfortable. So I put some prompts here just for you to think about as you co-watch or co-read with your kids. And you might ask them some questions, just some, really neutral questions of, how do you think so and so felt when this happened? Hey, what would you do? Like, I think I would do this. I don't know. What about you? Hey, like, who do you relate to in this show? Thinking about that long term, thinking through consequences. Hey, now that so and so did this, I wonder what's going to happen next. What do you think? Like, how do you think this is going to play out? Those kinds of reflective questions can get them to do a lot more thinking about themselves and their own relationships than they realize they're doing.
Another suggestion is to encourage your tween to do chores, which can be an uphill battle. But what chores do is they teach responsibility, accountability, and they turn your family into a community. Um, Many of these chores involve lifting or carrying or pushing or pulling and resistance, which is naturally calming because it gives your kid that proprioceptive input. Um, it encourages, muscle coordination, and sensory coordination, and problem solving. When you give your tween responsibilities, and they're successful at completing these responsibilities, it helps them see themselves as capable and important members of the family. So, preparing a snack for a sibling, or making a special dessert for, your parent, for the parents, or for a sibling, or something like that, I think really teaches your tween indirectly about what their positive actions can contribute to the other members in their family. Chores also provide the opportunities to strengthen their executive functioning. It provides predictability and routine, and it helps them develop the skills like time management and prioritization, which are really tricky, to do as adults. But I think if you provide your kids and encourage them to engage in one or two of these chores, it just helps guide and shape their day as well as shape their developing brains. Um, when a chore is completed successfully, it builds their self-esteem and encourages a growth mindset. They really see that their contributions matter, and that they're a valuable member of the family. Um, it also works on communication. If it, yeah.
And then the last skill that we wanted to highlight is a broader skill, which is just modeling. Thinking through whatever it is that you're working on with your tween, or you're, hoping for them to be building on, and thinking through how you can embody that skill in your own life. So, one area we're talking about building deeper relationships and thriving through the awkwardness of middle school friendships. Think about your own relationships. So many of us, when we become parents, we kind of lose sight of our adult relationships because our world becomes about our kids. This might actually be a great time in your kids' lives for you to have a kind of renaissance of your own friendships so that they can see what it looks like to put time and effort into them, to check in on your friends, to go do fun things with your friends, and to show up in all of the, different effective communication skills we mentioned earlier. You can also think about, how you demonstrate each of those skills. Like if your child is really struggling with, emotion dysregulation and they're fighting a lot, and so conflict resolution is kind of a relevant thing to work on, chances are they're getting your goat too. And you're probably having times where you're yelling because they're yelling. And so we can use those moments to think about, how do you want to demonstrate for them? Because kids are watching and learning from what we do. If you want them to learn how to resolve a conflict, then show them how to resolve a conflict, which is not always so easy to do. And so, I talk about building up your adult friendships, and that's very important. But it's also helpful to just take a beat and look at your relationships at home. Because I find that often, we're so much more socially put together with friends, or, teachers or colleagues and things like that. And at home, we sometimes take, grace and social skills a little bit for granted, particularly with spouses. I've noticed in my own relationship, once we had kids, all like social niceties with my husband kind of went out the window. And a lot of times we're just barking orders at each other just to survive, which is not what I want my kids to learn how to do. So it's a great place to kind of take a beat and look at, like, hey, so how do I talk to my partner? How do I talk to my kids? How do I want them to learn to talk to others? Like, let me show them.
Nice. Well, thank you all for listening to our presentation. I'm just going to summarize what we've touched on so far. So, the teenage years are a time of identity and social development. It comes with immense brain and body changes. Um, Everything feels off, and we don't really have the skills to understand why or be able to explain what's going on. Our social or your tween's social life becomes way more important. And with that comes self-consciousness and testing and identity. Um, and in addition, there's some sensory challenges and changes and sensitivities to our nervous system that impact your tween's engagement in everyday life activities. Things become harder, awkward, and their physiological needs change. That being said, this is a time when you, as parents or us as providers, can help you find ways to connect with your tween to help shape their virtues, their problem solving skills, and their independence. Um, like Caroline said, you're your tween's safety net, and there are ways to help them thrive. And I just summarized, a couple of the things that we touched upon, the key takeaways. You can support your tween by hosting game night, modeling problem solving and effective communication, connecting through movies and TV shows, and problem solving what the characters did and what that looked like, and if they made the right choice. Playing games and doing jobs around the house together to build that independence, that sense of community. And sense of self. And then there's ways to support their emotional regulation through active movement, through heavy work, through yoga and things like that. And then creating a cool off area that's neutral, that's like sensory deprivation, and just a spot for your tween to connect to themselves, to think, and to take a load off. So thank you all again for listening. Caroline and I are very happy to take any questions if you want to write them in the chat. I'll keep the summary slide up in case, yeah, okay. Those are our emails as well, if you have any further questions. If you do have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat.
Typing takes a minute, so we'll wait. We'll give it a beat. As I was talking, I was actually thinking about how another show that I'm finding a lot of tweens are into these days, that's from back in my day, is Grey's Anatomy. And I
Oh
actually
yeah.
rewatched Grey's Anatomy recently, and it is, I mean, they make such horrible social decisions. It's actually great content to be able to watch with a kid and be like, like, how do you think this one's gonna play out? And like getting to see the consequences of their not so thought out actions. A big
Yeah.
thank you to the comment. This was fabulous.
Bringing up Grey's Anatomy, so much of how they react to problems too. Like that's a great opportunity to talk about, is that a match? Like, do you think they're overreacting at all? Like, what was their problem solving?
Yep. I actually feel like it's very much to the level of a middle schooler. It is a lot of that
Yes.
impulsivity and not thinking things through before acting and big emotional reactions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll give it one more minute. We do welcome any question. And of course, as Grace mentioned, our emails are on here. If you have questions that you'd rather ask more privately, feel free to reach out to us. We're available. Okay. I think that might be it then. I don't see any questions coming in. So we thank you for being such a lovely audience. We really hope this was helpful. And we have these lecture series every month, so there'll be another great one coming in April.
Righty. Thank you all for joining.
Thanks, everybody.